I know that most of us, when we're into our houseplants, we tend to do it because we like the foliage. However, did you know that there's quite a few houseplants out there that have got some very unusual blooms? Stick around with me and let's have a look at some of these double hitters. Both the foliage is cool and the bloom is cool. Hi, my name is Memo. This is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So as I was just saying, there's a lot of houseplants out there that don't just have really interesting foliage. The blooms are actually something quite unique as well. And I know, a lot of us know that when you're getting a houseplant, 90 to 95% of the time, it's going to be the foliage that you're going to be looking at. However, when the blooms do occur on these specific plants, and this list is not exhaustive by the way, and I do encourage you, if you have more to add that I might have missed, put it down below and I can maybe showcase it in another video, or we just use this video as a repository of all of that information. But yeah, I want to focus on some interesting blooms today. So most of these plants, some of them I have actually owned. I think a lot of them I've actually owned at one point or another. And I can either bring out pictures of, if I can find some, of when these plants bloomed for me, or I will find some online and put them down here, put them on the side and link them down below as well. But without further ado, let's have a look at the first plant. And actually the first plant is not a specific plant, it is a group of plants that are part of the Ceropegia family, genera? I think it's genera. And I'll bring you a couple of examples. So one is the kind of known to everybody, quite a common house plant, the string of hearts, Ceropegia woodii, if I'm not mistaken. And most of us, as I said, we know this because of all the little the leaves that are little hearts, and you can get the variegated form as well, and I have grown both, and I do love growing both. I don't have it in my collection anymore because I always joke that that plant, that one, actually more so than even the string of pearls, that plant is one of the plants that if you are an individual that likes to kind of, what's the word, untwist, unwind, kind of Christmas lights or fairy lights, you know, when they get really untangle, that's the word I'm looking for on a Sunday morning. If you're the person who likes to untangle Christmas lights, this is the plant for you. Because you're going to be spending at least 50% of your time with this plant, especially the longer it gets, untangling the plant and trying to not lose leaves, which invariably you will do, which is fine. However, for the people that have been growing these types of plants for a while, and I will use the string of hearts here as an example, I've got another one that I'll talk about in just a second, but you may have noticed, if you've been really, really happy, that you'll get a bloom that looks really weird. It looks, for lack of better words, slightly phallic. Looks eggplanty, yes. With a bit of fuzz at the top. It doesn't look like any bloom that you may have seen before. And if you're just starting off in your houseplant journey, you're probably looking at that bloom and just kind of going, what is that? Your brain probably doesn't even assume necessarily that it's a bloom, but it is a bloom, I promise. And that is one example of a Ceropegia that's like that. The other one is, let me just double check what the name is, because I have got this in my collection, but I can never remember the name. The other one that I've been aware of, and I may have a picture of a bloom that I can put here, this is the Ceropegia sandersonii, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I just double checked, it is the sandersonii. And this one's got a kind of parachute looking bloom as well. So this Ceropegia generally will have interesting blooms and kind of elaborate blooms, for lack of better words. And I think I've touched on this on a video that I did on kind of terminology and kind of the Greeks and the Latins and all these things, and I'll link it at the top if I can find it. But Ceropegia originates from an ancient Greek word as far as I can tell. So Ceropegia is kind of either a chandelier or a candelabra, so you'd imagine something really kind of elaborate. Ceropegia generally will have these types of blooms that are very, very elaborate. To be fair, and this might just be my kind of limited knowledge on Ceropegia themselves, but the Sandersonii and the Woodii, the string of hearts, are the only two that I see regularly enough in the houseplant world. I am sure there might be more, but I don't, at least where I'm based, which is in the UK and in Europe, I don't tend to see any other Ceropegia other than these two. As I said, I'm sure there is more. If you do, or if you have come across or even owned a different type of Ceropegia, and you want to talk a bit more about the bloom of that plant, please do let us know down below. I'd love to go and like do a bit of a Googling to see. I love it when you all share specific plants that you might think I like, and I'm just like, oh my God, look at all of this. So yeah, Ceropegia, first one on the list. The next one is a plant that I do own one species of it, I think, rather than the genera itself. It's the genera itself that's got really interesting blooms, and it is an orchid. And these are the Dracula type orchids. And as I said, I'm pretty sure the genus is the Dracula part of it, otherwise I'll correct myself at the top there. I have the Dracula solii. I have still, for the people that have been here for years, I have still not got it to bloom. I have got it to go into flower spike several times over. It aborts every single time. However, and hopefully I'll find an image or different images of different Dracula orchids, blooms, that I can put in this section so you can kind of have a look at. I mean, look at it. Look at it. The blooms of the Dracula orchids are the ones that are commonly known, if I'm not mistaken, as monkey face orchids. Now, very, very cool. Again, and I can't remember what, there is a word where, is it anthropomorphize? Or kind of something that we as humans try to attach an idea that we understand to it, basically. So in this case, the fact that they look like monkey faces probably has no bearing biologically for the plant, other than the fact that it might look a bit interesting for its pollinators, but it didn't go out of its way to evolve into a bloom that looks like a monkey face. A monkey face is what we see in it because it looks like a monkey face. But they are very, very cool blooms. And I say even, I should have given you a hint when I said that I have not managed to get mine to bloom. Not that I am an expert in orchids by any stretch of the imagination. But these, if I'm not mistaken, most, if not all, of the Dracula orchids tend to be from very, very high elevations in cloud forests, which means that in order to give it the right conditions, in order for it to bloom, they need a significant drop in temperature at night. To give you an idea, I think the temperatures at night need to drop, I might be wrong and I'll correct myself, drop down to 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, which for the majority of us, we can't achieve that easily in a household condition, especially considering that it also needs high levels of humidity. It is one of those things, because some of you might be smart and going, oh, I can put it near an air conditioning unit in the summer and see if it can kind of keep it down. And yeah, but if you put it near an air conditioning unit, you're also drying it out, so you're missing the other part of the equation there. But they are exceptionally difficult. I don't think they're impossible to get to bloom. I know some people in the UK, what they'll do, and I've been wanting to do this for years, but I'm always a bit worried that I'm going to kill the plant. I might bite the bullet next year and do this, or technically 2025's autumn, so this year. But I'm weird. I'm weird. I don't know if there's anybody else that does this. I still think of years in terms of academic years. I have not been a student or gone to school for many a decades, but yeah, I still think of like a year as in like September to kind of June, kind of the academic year, and then the new year starts in September rather than the calendar year. I'm weird, I get it. I might be the only one, but do tell me if you're like me. But yeah, it is one of those things that this autumn I do potentially want to try this. And what they do is they will take their Dracula solii orchid out in autumn, not in winter, and maybe put it into something like a unheated greenhouse. When those temperatures start to drop enough that plant will get that fluctuation that it needs in order to stimulate growth. And I can say this from experience, not my own experience, but from somebody that I personally know locally here. They've managed to get their Dracula orchid to bloom. I don't know if it was just the one time, and it was somebody that I follow and I've met kind of a few times in the local area who's very much into plants. They work in the plant industry as well, and they have an unheated greenhouse, and that is how they did it. So Dracula orchids, very, very cool blooms, not just the leaves. If anything, actually, most of the Dracula orchid kind of foliage is very grass-like, so it's actually very uninteresting, but very cool blooms nonetheless. I was about to say first Anthurium on the list, but actually only Anthurium on the list. I am sure there are others, but can you guess which Anthurium I'm going to be talking about here? One that I recently added to the collection finally. The Anthurium Wendlingeri, and I do not have mine in bloom. It's way too juvenile. I will see about finding a picture and putting it here. I don't think anybody who's into anthuriums would be surprised that I'm going to be including this in a weird bloom or interesting bloom kind of video, but Anthurium Wendlingeri, the inflorescence, instead of the spadix, that long dangly bit usually, is not straight in the Wendlingeri's case, it is corkscrew. So imagine like the kind of stereotypical cartoon pigtail. So that kind of corkscrew, very, very different. And obviously because the plant is kind of pendant, so the leaves are kind of strappy leaves, a bit like the Vitarifolium. The leaves will drop down and the bloom is actually quite a long spadix as well by some of the pictures that I've seen. Obviously some of these plants, in order to get them to bloom and to get them to create long blooms, they need to be of a certain age. But very, very cool nonetheless, because how often do you see a bloom that's like a corkscrew? It's very, very, very interesting. There is one, and I cannot remember it. I used to have it years ago, and I cannot remember the name either, that I have found in garden centres, which is the more, I don't think it's a Anthurium andreanum, which is the more kind of typical Anthurium that you might get in most shops and plant shops or even the supermarket, you know, with the typical kind of Anthurium bloom. This might be a hybrid, but I found one that had red spathe, so you know that leaf-like structure that people assume are the petals of the bloom in an Anthurium. So that was red, and the spadix, the long bit in the middle, wasn't a full corkscrew, but it did do a bit of a kind of a squiggle. So that one was really, really cool. I killed that plant way too quickly. I didn't kill it too quickly, I lie. This was the beginning of my kind of houseplanty journeys. But it did take about a year, and I don't know if I actually killed it or if I gave up on it as well, because I just could not get it to rebloom. I couldn't get it happy because I didn't know what I was doing at all with Anthuriums back then. Possibly if I found it again, and I've always said if I find it, I do want to add it back into the collection. I have not found it in that specific garden centre since nearly 5 years ago when I bought this plant. So hopefully if I do find it, I will add it soon, because it's interesting. It's red as well, so it's a bit more than just a standard kind of Anthurium andreanum. And as I said, it might be a hybrid or it might be an entirely different species altogether, but very, very cool. It does look, the leaves and everything else looks like the andreanum basically, so that's why I thought I'd kind of give that a bit of an honourable mention. But yes, the Wendlingeri, I mean, so yeah, I had to include it in this section. On to another orchid. Unsurprisingly, there's going to be, is that the last orchid? That is the last orchid group, basically, again. So I think this is a genera. So the Bulbophyllum type of orchids, they have got a slew of different bloom types. I will add one that I've been trying to grow out for years. Has it bloomed even once for me? No. I have got, saying that now, I have got 1, 2, 3, either 3 or 4 Bulbophyllum orchids, and one of them is annoying because I'll show you actually, let me show you. So one is the one that I'm showing you here, very, very small Bulbophyllum, because usually they've got like a bulbous bit there in the leaf. There, I was going to say I don't think that's going to make it. You might be able to see the tiniest little kind of flower spike there. It looked like it was doing fine, but it's starting to go brown. I don't even know if it opened up. I'll see if I can find an image of what it would have looked like and put it here. I was very excited because this is a very new and young plant for me, so I did not assume it was going to bloom. And anybody who's seen my recent videos about the fact that some of my plants got underwater, this included some of my orchids. So unfortunately, I think it may have caused a bit of a problem for that one. It gives me hope though that this will bloom, the fact that it even brought out a singular spike to bloom as well there. So high hopes for this one. However, with Bulbophyllums, I will show you some images here. I've got two that I'm really looking forward to. This is the first one that I had bought years ago. It still hasn't done very much. That has suffered with root rot several times over, but it finally seems like it might be happy, and I will add the picture of what that will look like here, including the name, because I cannot remember now. That one is very cool because it's giving, I don't know if anybody's ever watched the movie Cocoon. It's giving that kind of vibe. It's giving chrysalis vibe and loads of different ones. It's very, very cool. The other one that I have is a similar kind of concept to that one, so I'll add the picture there and the name down below. That one is a much more established plant from when I bought it, and it's doing really well. I have not had a singular flower spike yet on it, but here's to hoping. Now, before anybody who's into orchids says this, I am fully aware that these blooms are not going to smell nice. And a bit of a spoiler, a kind of warning here as to what's about to come. I will be talking about more stinky plants or stinky blooms in some of the next sections. But these blooms apparently, if I'm not mistaken, for most Bulbophyllum, I don't know if it's all, but a lot of the Bulbophyllum do have really, they don't smell great, which to me would assume that maybe they are pollinated by something that is attracted by that smell, maybe something like flies or beetles or things like that. So very, very cool blooms, but there is a bit of a warning with this one that they might be a bit so just be forewarned. But Bulbophyllum Orchids, the orchid itself looks okay. It's nothing really interesting to write home about. Let me show you the bigger one actually, the second bloom that I just showed you. See if I can get it down. There we go. That's a bit more of a substantial orchid, and you can kind of see why it's called a Bulbophyllum as well. Little kind of like pseudobulbs on there. Very, very, very cool. This one I think is very, very happy. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe 8 new growth points on this. So I've got really high hopes that this is gonna be happy enough to want to bloom for me. So keep your fingers crossed for me, and let's see if I can get this one to bloom, because this one's also got really, really, really interesting blooms. So let's see what happens. And just to interrupt your regularly scheduled viewing, I've got a few kind of community updates actually, with a few exciting things that are happening, which I thought I'd share with all of you. One being a really interesting competition that I've heard from one of you lovely people actually. And if you don't follow Bear Paw Aroids, I will put the Instagram at the top. I have mentioned him before, but in collaboration with Chop and Grow, they are doing, I think it's an 8-month challenge. I did tell them, just like, is this okay if I share this with my community? Because I think they'd either like to take part or at least kind of watch the proceedings, because I don't think I've heard of anything like this being done before. So it's a really, really interesting challenge. And I've got my phone here because I've got all the information on here. I put all of the details down in the description below, so do check that out. And so essentially what this challenge is a chance for a lot of people to showcase their houseplanting skills, where essentially, from what I understand, they will get a house plant and nurture it to its fullest potential. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the biggest, it could be the healthiest, the best growth, all of these things. And after that 8-month period, there's going to be kind of regular check-ins as well with the wider community and the people that are taking part, if they want to do that. It will be judged by both the community and as well. And that is going to be quite an interesting thing as well. So the votes are all going to be kind of anonymous. There are a slew of prizes. I'm not going to bore you on here. It's a very long list. I'll put it down below. There's vouchers to be won plenty. And the kind of rules and regulations aren't too difficult. They need to be done by the end of February, so this month, which is why I'm hoping to get it out as quickly as possible in this week's kind of update. But it's a really, really cool thing, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. I know, you know, you've got the usual kind of like click and follow and share, and you can be part of a competition, but this feels much more involved, which for me, I like that. That's kind of cool because you can kind of see how different people are growing things. Potentially, if some of the participants or the contestants are growing the same thing, it'd be really interesting to see how the same plants at the beginning might end up after the 8-month period. And I think it's really cool, that 8-month part here. It's a bit of a dedication, but I think it's quite cool because you'll get to see kind of a true transition within that plant, within those kind of 8 months, really. So if you're interested, might be one to check out. And following on with this, I've got an update on a cool product that I was trying. It won't take very long of the video, but I thought I'd share it because I've had good experiences. So over to past memo, and then I'll come back to current memo to give you an update on the specific product. Okay, so we've got something a bit special, and this is something that happened when I went to the London plant swap, and I spoke to the team from Grow Gang. And they were mentioning that there's going to be a new product that they're going to be bringing on the market, and if I'd be interested for them to send it over to me to give it a bit of a test run. And considering that I quite liked their Piantolite, if I'm not mistaken, if I am, I'm going to put the correct name there. I thought, you know what, definitely want to try this. And it was really nice. It was kind of surprised the other day. It was just before I went over to Greece, so apologies, let me move some plants out of the way so they're not like flapping in the wind. But I got their Clariolite. Apologies, the box is a bit battered. Not to do with their shipping, it was more to do with I unboxed this from the bigger box when it arrived just before I left, and I think whilst I was not at home, this got moved around a few times, so the box is looking a bit worse for wear, but the product inside is still looking really cool. So it's a full spectrum pendant grow light, so I'm really excited for this, especially for my bird of paradise. And I thought, before I kind of do a little kind of, I'm hoping for a bit of a time lapse, like a quick little clip of me kind of installing it, because it seems really straightforward. Famous last words, but I'm sure it will be. I'll show you what the actual product is like in the box, and then I'll kind of show you how it's installed, hopefully in the same clip. If not in the same clip, it will probably be in a couple of weeks' time. I'll kind of give you my thoughts about it, but I have my thoughts, but I do have high hopes. Words are difficult on a Saturday. This is also the first Saturday that I'm back after being away in Greece, so a lot of things have happened already this morning. So, although you will be very proud of me, I did, within 2 days, I watered most of my collections, and that is hundreds of plants. So it's a proper watering day today. The watering has not happened yet. It will happen after the DIY element that I'm going to do right now. But there is instructions which seem really clear. I've already seen this. So essentially, if I want to do it, I want to install it on the ceiling, which I think is the only way you can. You need to mark the spot, drill a hole, screw the ceiling hook in, and they've got different instructions about kind of if it's wooden ceilings, if it's drywall, all of these things. And it comes with all the different bits, and then they've got instructions on how to hang it. It's really simple. I'm not going to bore you on this bit. You'll see when I kind of put it on. But essentially, it looks like a really cool, it's going to be difficult to visualize, but it's very long cable. This is where the light is. You can kind of see the light there. My bird of paradise needs as much light as it can possibly get. I've got a jerry-rigged kind of grow light that I will show you at the beginning of me setting this up so you can see. But this should provide all the top-down lighting that I can possibly dream of for the bird of paradise. And considering that their Piantolite is very bright, I'm hoping this will be the same. I'm sure it will be. And it's exactly what the bird of paradise will need. And then it also comes with a 2-year warranty card, which is great. And this is all the bits that are needed for this. This is really cool. So looking forward to that. And the other thing that I hadn't noticed in the bigger box, and I'm hoping this is going to continue and this is like a normal thing, it comes with a smart timer. which is really, really cool. So most of my things are on smart timers anyway, because I need to kind of like time things when they come on and off, especially something like this that is going to be in my living space and it's very, very bright. It usually switches off a bit earlier than most of my other kind of lights because they're bright and I need to be able to just unwind and maybe watch some TV in the evening. So without further ado, hopefully the next clip will be me installing it. I will probably be fast forwarding any kind of sound because if it's anything like me when I do DIY, I do enjoy it and I do always relish a chance to do some DIY, but depending on how it goes, there might be some colourful language which won't be showing up in the video. So here you can kind of see the grow light that I was talking about right there, and I've just kind of dairy rigged it. There's a big, big grow light in there. I can't remember where, that might have been a seedling grow light that I got, but it's loving life. Just to give you an idea, this leaf here hadn't even happened, and I very rarely get a new leaf in the winter with the Bird of Paradise. I tend to get it only in the summer when it's outside, so this is really loving life. Also, none of the leaves have kind of like died back this winter, which means that grow light is doing the most. And I'm going to be attaching the new Grow Gang grow light at the top so we can get some top-down lighting. So yes, let's do that. All right, and that is all the like drilling and screwing done. See, it wasn't that difficult. It literally is one hook at the very top where the light is going to kind of hang from. You'll see that in a minute. One on the side so you can pull the wire. I had to go a bit lower because I think I've got sconces. Is that sconces? The thing between the ceiling and the wall. I'm not great with these things. And then one more down below to bring the cable down closer to the plug, and then you can plug it in. So let me just put it all together and let's see what it does. Also to say the drilling wasn't that difficult. To be fair, they have a really clear instructions. 6mm drill bit. You drill into the wall, you put the wall plug in, and then past that point you basically just make sure that when you're threading the screw into the wall plug, you go through the little attachment hooks or clips on the side, and it's as simple as that. They couldn't have made it any easier actually, which is really, really nice, and I'm looking forward to seeing a beautiful light like this working. So let me bring back the ladder. I mean, look at it. It looks really, really, really cool up there. So let me switch off this one and put this on a regular plug for now, and then I'll sort out the smart plug. I mean, isn't that just a lot more aesthetically pleasing? And it's still really, really super bright. And I'm sure the leaves will kind of move around to adjust to that new grow light, but I think that looks a lot nicer than that super like awkward light that I had there. That I'm really happy with. So let me see if I can sort out the smart plug and I will come back to you. And there you go. Smart plug is connected. I can switch it off from my phone. I can switch it back on from my phone. And now because of that, I can actually set up different routines as to when it will switch on and off, basically. So I can have it on a timer, I can do a schedule, and I can do all the days of the week. I'm assuming everybody else has done schedules as well for their devices. Make it so that it's not going to wake up the dog that usually sleeps right behind where the camera is. And I will save that. That's on. And then every evening, again, so that it doesn't disturb the dog, make sure that it switches off at a standard time. Save that. Yeah, and it is now as simple as that. That is now set up. The good thing is the app for the smart bulb, because I've had this for some of my other smart devices, it also tells you how much electricity is being used per month and per day as well. So you can kind of keep an eye on that if you really wanted to keep an eye on that. But yes, what do you think? I think it's really cool. So as I said, I don't know whether or not in this video I will be updating you on how I've found it for the last couple of weeks or for the next 2 weeks. In this case, I'm not tested it yet. I'm testing it for the next 2 weeks. Maybe not. You might be on a different video. But yeah, that was me receiving and installing the Claria grow light from the awesome team at GrowGang. So you saw the product, you saw me install it. Hopefully I'll fast forward my swearing when I'm doing the DIY. It was very, very straightforward. I think even if you've got very basic DIY skills, you should be able to do it. Realistically, it's only a couple of screws in the wall, some wall plugs, and you're fine. And the smart plug has been amazing. I'll show you a clip talking through kind of what I'm noticing, but overall, I've been very impressed with the GrowGang's new grow light. And I think essentially I'll show you the plant now and the kind of results will talk for themselves. And remember, this is for a bird of paradise, a Nikolai bird of paradise, a white bird of paradise, which needs a lot of light. And you'll see one of its leaves is very, very close to the light itself. It hasn't scorched it, it's doing really, really well, it's growing spectacularly, it hasn't had any issues, and bear in mind where that plant is gets very little light other than the artificial light that I am giving it. So let me show you what the plant is doing. So do ignore the mess because this is a lived-in house, but you can see the light up there. It has done super, super well. The smart plug has done its thing. It switches on when it needs to. It switches off when it needs to switch off. That's the leaf that I'm talking about that's very, very close to the light. And everything else is getting a decent volume of leaves. There is a tiny bit of light that's coming in from that conservatory window, but in the winter, realistically, today is a bad example because it's an actual sunny day, but we get very few of those here. So it's doing really, really well. I need to move my other grow light, which is going to go into my seedling greenhouse for the allotment plants for this year. But this one is doing exceptionally well. Obviously this is memo approved. It is a great product and really, really quite pretty as well. And I used to see some of these types of lights, grow lights, from other companies, and they were extortionately expensive. This is, I think, a relatively decent price as well. So if you're thinking of getting something like a much more visually pleasing grow light, but it's actually also strong enough, this is definitely one to consider. And the next one is a very common type of houseplant that maybe people don't give it more than just a few thoughts. And actually this was interesting. It was a picture of one of the blooms of this plant, which I was aware of, but a lot of people weren't. And I think it came up somewhere on my Instagram that kind of triggered me to think, ooh, this might be an interesting video topic for people to watch. The cast iron plant, or the Aspidistra elatia, if I'm not mistaken. So cast iron plant, very kind of like big paddly type of leaves. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's a grass technically, I might be wrong. But it's a very kind of hardy plant. There's a reason why it was called the cast iron plant. I think the stories I've heard around this is that it's been around since the Victorian times, at least here in the UK. And it used to be so hardy that it'd be right next to like kind of fireplaces and things like that. So not great kind of air conditions, a lot of like dry heat as well and things like that, and it survived. So it is a plant that, try not to overwater it. Think more ZZ-esque things. Maybe don't go quite as dry as you would with a ZZ plant, but this is one that does not like to drown in water. It will rot away. However, interesting plant to look at, really hardy as well. What most people don't realize with this, and I'm hoping I can find a picture to show you, the blooms of this plant, the weird thing about the blooms of this plant is they're at the soil level. So there are blooms that literally come up at the soil level. So a lot of people, when they first see a bloom, if you've managed to get your cast iron plant to bloom, firstly, big congratulations to you. I don't think they bloom particularly easily, let alone in household conditions. But they are at the soil level, so people always kind of freak out going, well, what's going on with my plant? Am I getting, is it maybe like a mushroom or something like that, before they kind of look at it open up? And it's a really weird looking kind of flower on the kind of soil level as well. And again, I don't know how accurate it is, but from what I could tell, the thinking is, or they know that it is, I'll see if I can find if there's been scientifically proven who pollinates this plant, because that is the reason for its location. I think it's slugs and snails, which would make sense that it would be on the kind of soil level. I might be wrong with this one, it might be beetles or anything like that, but it is very unusual in the sense that the bloom comes out from under the soil rather than it being on stems and things like that. And it's a very unusual looking bloom itself as well. The next one I have grown in a way. So I did not have this specific plant that I'm going to talk about now, but the bloom on the plant that I did was very similar. And that is kind of decorative gingers. So I had the spiral ginger, the spiral variegated ginger. The bloom was very similar looking to the plant that I want to talk about. And I mean, to be fair, do not get me wrong, decorative gingers will have interesting blooms anyway, but the one I want to talk about is something that's, I think, colloquially known as shampoo ginger. I'm not going to add a video here, but feel free after watching this video to have a quick look at some videos on YouTube and you'll understand why I'm sniggering, if you don't already know, basically. But this is a bloom that essentially, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to describe this. So the bloom is unusual in itself, but if you squeeze it and kind of pull upwards, there's, I want to say kind of a mucusy kind of situation that happens within the bloom, and it comes out and it does look a bit like, just imagine clear shampoo, slightly opaque shampoo. Oh, I hope that this video doesn't get banned for this reason alone, just the description. But essentially, as far as I can understand, that mucusy kind of fluid you can use, and I think it lathers up as well, as a shampoo. So people that kind of, maybe some of the native peoples around where this plant was growing would harvest out of these plants and use it to clean their hair. Potentially, I would imagine, clean other things as well. It's just a bit. Oh, yeah, shampoo ginger is... If you don't know what I'm talking about and you do the video, I'm hoping you'll understand why I'm giggling away, basically. But yes, I couldn't not include shampoo ginger in this, or any ginger actually. The other gingers don't have the mucusy thing as far as I'm aware, but they do have very unusual kind of blooms. And if you've ever grown a decorative ginger, they can be very, very, very pretty plants. Not just a spiral one, but a lot of the decorative gingers, there's one that doesn't spiral and it has variegated leaves as well and all these things. Very, very cool plants. Interesting in how they are cared for. If you are one of the people who I know because when I created that video ages ago, I was one of the people that was looking for it. If you're looking for how I grew my spiral ginger, I will link it at the top there, because I knew back then, I don't know, there might be a few more videos now, there wasn't a lot of videos out there about how to care for a spiral ginger, and I figured it out as I went along, basically. So that's useful for you. I would have linked it at the top. The next plant is one that can be very common as a house plant, and this is pretty much all Sansevieria, all now reclassified as Dracaenas. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you're fortunate enough and you've got a big enough, my Moonshine Sansevieria bloomed for me. My Trafasciata, I think, bloomed for me at some point as well. I've got the Metallica now as well. I'm hoping that might bloom at some point. They've got very, very unusual blooms. Again, I'll see if I can find a picture of a Sansevieria bloom and kind of put it at the top there. Very, very cool. It's kind of a bit dainty. It's a bit kind of wispy as well. It doesn't smell great in my experience, but it's not something that projects a weird smell, if that makes sense. So you need to shove your nose in the bloom to then realize, slightly cabbagey, I guess. Not quite as cabbagey as the fern leaf cactus. Oh, that had a beautiful bloom and I shoved my face in it and I'm just like, oh, it smells like boiled cabbage. But not quite as bad as that, but Sansevieria blooms are very unusual looking. It's not the kind of bloom that you would expect. And it's quite nice because I don't think Sansevierias are that difficult to get to bloom. As I said, some of my Sansevierias have bloomed pretty much every year for me. You just need to get them to a certain size, basically, and they need to be happy. But a lot of people have got like generational Sansevierias or snake plants that have been there for like years. So at some point or other, that plant probably has bloomed or will bloom for you. So yeah, very unusual. I couldn't not add a Sansevieria bloom to this list. We're finishing off with two stinky plants, two stinky bloom plants. So one, I think it's part of the Stopelia family, if I'm not mistaken. I'll see if I can add it at the top there. And I don't know if the kind of common term that I'm going to use now is used to describe multiple different types of this plant, or if it's just one specific one, but I'm thinking of something that's called the Lifesaver Plant. So very, very unusual looking bloom, because it kind of almost looks like it's made out of kind of plasticine, I find, or plastic. And it's got that ring that looks like a lifesaver, the candy basically. You can kind of see what I mean here. Sometimes with Stopelias, they've also got some hairs on the leaves. However, they are pollinated by flies, beetles, all of these things. So this is another plant that fine for you to have in your house until it blooms. As soon as you start seeing it start to bloom, hopefully the weather is warm enough, because you might want to put that out in the garden or somewhere outside for a few days until the bloom passes, because this is one that I've never had one that I've owned ever go to bloom, which I'm so disappointed, because I'd love to see one of these blooms and smell it just out of curiosity up close. But this one smells a bit like, as far as I've been told, like kind of rotting meat. It's used to attract flies. So it needs to, yeah. You can also understand possibly why the look of the bloom is the way that it is, considering who its pollinator is. But yes, I could not, is that double negative? I couldn't not. Oh, double negatives. I had to include the Lifesaver Plant, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Words on a Sunday. Oh, Memo. And then I'll finish off with the last plant, which again is another stinky plant. This might be one that more people are kind of aware of. And I'm trying to think of how I've put it down on my list. I've put it in as a corpse flower. Now, there's a lot of things that might be called a corpse flower. Obviously, you won't likely have what most people will recognize as a corpse flower, which I'll put a picture here, which is the Arum titanicum or Arum titanium. I can't remember what the name is. I will put it at the top there. But the one that you see, which is absolutely huge, that you will see usually at botanical gardens, and usually it's a big deal when they get it to bloom, because it doesn't bloom that often. The bloom might be one of the largest in the world, I might be wrong. And it's, again, not something that you would necessarily assume is a bloom, but one that definitely stinks of death. Now, you could have different other, so I've had a Sarumantum, I think. I'll put it up there, something called a voodoo lily. I had another one that I've got in my garden, which for the love of all the love of money, I cannot remember it. I'll add it up there. That one I do think I've got an image. I need to scroll back to last summer and find an image, because I did take an image of that bloom. They're all very similar. They've got that spadix in the middle. It is an aroid, if I'm not mistaken, so it's got the spathe around as well. They all kind of look slightly differently. They're all not exactly like the way that you would imagine the corpse flower to be, but it's that kind of vibe, and I can confirm, because I got mine to bloom last year, and I'm just like, oh, it's one of the stinky plants. Let's go and see. Reeks, it reeks. To the point that I had put it somewhere far back in my garden, but anybody that lives in the UK, so my garden, as most people gardens, there's a fence on one side to another neighbour's garden, a fence on the other side to another neighbour's garden, and at the very bottom of the garden there's a fence to the neighbour at the back's garden as well, and it was right at the back of my garden, because I thought, you know what, I'm not going to smell it. I got close enough to kind of go, oh no, because I might not be able to smell it. It's close enough to their fence that I'm just like, I am so sorry. Which is fine, if I'm being honest, because those neighbours are exceptionally inconsiderate and rude to all the other neighbours around. So I'm just like, sucks to be you. Bad memo, bad memo. Don't do that. But it does smell. Most of these blooms do smell bad, because again, they are meant to be pollinated by things like flies, things that are attracted to these smells. So it does. I know a lot of people say it smells like rotting meat. This is such a bad topic. The closest thing I can compare this to is, and this is going to be a very visceral reaction to a lot of people from warm countries. You know when you put your bags of rubbish out for the rubbish people to collect it, and maybe it's a particularly sunny and warm day, and you get this hum of like rotting garbage or like overheating garbage? That's what it smells like. Hot garbage. It's just, it's not for everybody. But again, a lot of these plants, you can usually just move them out into the garden, so they're not in your house. They're quite pretty. A lot of these types of plants as well, they will have one central kind of stem. If I'm not mistaken, they've got one leaf at any given time. So the one leaf is essentially, imagine one stem, or basically in this case it's a petiole with multiple little leaflets, but that is just the one leaf, and it's the same with the corpse flower. So very, very cool plant. Some of these as well, they'll have a year where they just have the leaves, or several years, and then they have enough energy to push out a flower, and that's the only thing that happens. So you can kind of work around the stench, if that makes sense. Or the one that I got in my garden is one that's meant to be relatively hardy, even in the UK, to stay in the ground, and it should come back this summer again. I know from other people that are based in the Netherlands, they've had it in the gardens for years and they can confirm it's fine. And that's fine, because that will always be out there, you can see it, and try to avoid smelling it. The bloom is beautiful. The bloom is a very interesting thing, just don't get too close. The smell is a bit, just a hard pass. So yeah, that was all of the plants that I wanted to cover. I am sure, as I've said, that I have missed some. Did I miss your favorite? Or did I miss something that isn't your favorite, but you know that I've missed a plant? Do let me know down below. And as I said, it might become a series, it might just become a repository of information, I don't know. But don't sleep on plants. As I said, we'll get these plants predominantly for their foliage. That's generally what you're going to get this plant for. But you might also get pleasantly surprised by the bloom looking like something that you've never experienced before. Very, very cool. because a lot of the times we're all used to looking at blooms that look very kind of same format with the petals and the middle bits and all these things. There's scientific words there that that's just not coming to my mind right now, but yeah, these are different. And I think that is a perk of us growing tropical houseplants indoors, is that we will see blooms from those plants that we're probably not used to seeing out and about, unless you live in the tropics, obviously. But yeah, what did you think? Interesting, yeah? Like, some of these blooms are just really stunning, weird, kooky, unusual, stinky, not stinky, all of the above. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.